Hello and shalom, everybody. My name is Julia Jassy, and you are listening to Nice Jewish Girls, brought to you by Unpacked, a division of Open Door Media. Today, we are speaking with Sabrina Miller, a political writer and reporter. Coming off of the conversation we had last week with Michal Cohen, Sabrina Miller is the perfect guest to show the global interconnectedness of this experience of antisemitism on college campuses. As a student at the University of Bristol in the UK, Miller was excited to be a student and have a wonderful school experience. Instead, she began to experience antisemitism beyond anything she could have imagined, not just by a peer or a classmate, but by her professor. Her story is not just one of immense resonance to many college students around the world today, but it is truly one of inspiration, of finding strength in the face of the most dreadful abuse. As you'll hear, at the time of the recording of this conversation, Professor Miller's status was in limbo. But I am very excited to share that as of today, he has been fired by the University of Bristol. So that is in large part because of the work of activists like Sabrina. Way to go, Sabrina. In this conversation, I want to ask her what it's like to fear for your safety because you are Jewish identity, of course. But more than that even, I want to ask Sabrina how to find strength in the face of an attack on your identity. I want to ask her how optimism and even humor can give you strength in the darkest of times. I am so excited for you guys to meet her. Let's do this thing. Sabrina Miller is a political writer and reporter at Guido Fox. She also works as a freelance journalist and has written for The Telegraph, The Times, The Independent, HuffPost UK, The Jewish Chronicle, Mail Plus, and has appeared on GB News. She graduated with a degree in English from the University of Bristol, and as a student, she vehemently campaigned on the issue of antisemitism. Sabrina, it is so wonderful to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to meet you too. I'm really excited.
Me too. Let's get right into it as usual. Can you begin by telling us a bit about where you're from?
Yeah, so I am from London, well, Hertfordshire technically, and I went to university in Bristol, so I went over there for a bit and now I'm back and I've actually just moved to an area called West Hampstead, which is sort of slightly more central but still northwest London, which is where a lot of British Jews live.
You know, I'm from Long Island, New York, as a regular listener might know, and there's an area on Long Island called West Hampstead, so not too different.
Anyway, sick.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience growing up and your Jewish identity in your life?
My Jewish identity has always been such an important aspect of my life. Both my parents sort of raised me in modern Orthodox tradition, went to shul once a week, kept kosher, and then I actually lived in Canada for 2 years where I went to a Jewish school.
Wow.
Yeah, fun. It was called Associated, and then came back and I went to a Jewish secondary school. And that sort of reinforced a lot of my Jewish education. I went on this thing called Tour. I don't know if you have it in the US. It's a bit like Birthright, but not really. It's for a lot of people after their GCSEs, which is an important exam for British people. And after that, a lot of Jews go to Israel, and that was sort of quite a formative part of my Jewish Zionist identity. And so, yeah, it's always been a key part of who I am, and sort of at every stage in my life, Judaism has been there.
And your college experience was pretty intense, and I really want to get into that. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with anti-Semitism in college?
Yeah, so I went to the University of Bristol, like I mentioned, and the sort of every year there was a different anti-Semitic incident that sort of we ended up dealing with, and sort of one key one that's sort of ongoing. But I'm very involved in my Jewish community. So I was a big part of Bristol's Jewish Society. I was their campaigns officer in my second year, and sort of very involved in my first year and third year as well. And so sort of was always right in the middle of a lot of these issues. So in my first year, for instance, we had these things called student union officers. I don't know sort of American equivalents, so apologies if I'm sort of explaining things that you're already quite familiar with.
The dynamic in America is actually super different. I think this is really helpful. Thank you so much.
So these student union positions, so they're essentially elected students who represent other students. And the BME officer, which is the Black Minority Ethnic Officer, had told a Jewish student to be like Israel and cease to exist. in my, I think, second year. It sort of overlapped, and then he was elected into this role. And this sort of, at the time I thought was going to be the big anti-Semitic incident I had to deal with, little did I know. But sort of that caused a lot of problems and sort of lack of cohesion, and there was a lot of tension there, and bad relations with the student union, which is always unpleasant because, you know, as a student group, you want to have a good relationship with the student union. So I spent a lot of time sort of speaking to the individual who'd made the remark and trying to sort of work out an appropriate course of action, convince them that they were wrong. That was a lot of wasted time. That was hours of time I'll never get back. No, it's fine. Whatever. So that was sort of my first year, and there was a few other instances here and there. You know, people inviting anti-Semitic speakers, the classic. I don't know if this is. It felt very classic. And then it started sort of in my first year, and it's still ongoing. So apologies if sort of my timeline's a bit off. It feels like it's literally been a third of my life at this point. But there's this lecturer at the University of Bristol called David Miller. We're not related. Who did
unfortunate name, yeah.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Literally, the Miller problems at Bristol University just do not stop. And so he was giving this lecture in this module called the Harms Against the Powerful module, where he essentially argued that Zionism and British Jewry, by connection, caused Islamophobia in the UK. And he used these quite unique conspiratorial diagrams and webs to sort of point. Essentially, Israel was at the top, the Labour and Conservative Party, which are the two major parties in the UK, were at the bottom, and then various Jewish organisations were sort of manipulating and influencing, using their power and money and whatever, we've heard this before. So that was his sort of key lecture. And so naturally, a few Jewish students in his class sort of anonymously came forward and through the JSOC made a complaint. But that died down after a year and a half. No one really talked about it, and it sort of lost public attention. And then this same lecturer sort of popped back up in February 2021. And he was giving, I can't remember for whom, but was in this Zoom seminar thing where he sort of doubled down on his previous statements and sort of accused, I'm not sure exactly the timeline, but at various points have accused Bristol JSOC of being a pawn of Israel, has said Zionism is the root of all evil or sentiments similar, and just sort of continues to double down on these comments, and sort of that reinvigorated a lot of the problems and a lot of the anger. And as someone that had been dealing with him for that point like a year, I sort of was like, enough is enough. I'm just going to start a petition and be as loud as I possibly can for the next 6 months before I graduate. And so I started the petition, which did ridiculously well.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that perked the interests of this other news magazine called Electronic Intifada, who sent me quite a scary email. I think it was one Wednesday night. I was sort of sitting, I think I was watching Drag Race or something with my flatmates. And then I sort of got this email from Aswan Stanley saying, request for comment, in the article is going to be out at 9 a.m. tomorrow. And it was like 10 p.m. the day before. And I was like, well, that seems a bit rude, doesn't it? Because I
not much journalistic integrity over there.
No. And then so I was like frantically like calling like I was just like, so UJS, which is the Union of Jewish Students, they sort of help Jewish students whenever they need it. So I was like, I know it's 10 p.m. I know you're asleep, but please pick up the phone. I didn't know what to do. So a lot of panic there. And then, so I decided not to comment in the end. So I just sort of ignored the email. And then the guy didn't publish the article until 6 p.m, which just meant that I was like refreshing Twitter aggressively for 12 hours. I think he really got into my head there, and that was quite stressful. And then the article came out, and that sort of prompted quite a lot of anti-Semitic abuse online. And I'd received a bit of anti-Semitic abuse before, but this really boosted my profile, sometimes for good reasons, but largely in that circumstance for the worse. And I got, thousands of comments from Electronic Intifada accounts or Stan accounts or whatever you want to call them. And sort of it died down after, so I'm really taking you through the beginning and end of this, but it started to die down a bit. And then Ali, who is I didn't know this at the time, the editor-in-chief of the Electronic Intifada based in America, started randomly tagging me in sort of videos or quote tweeting me for no reason, sort of 2 or 3 weeks after the initial article, which just sort of meant there was and he has, I can't remember exactly, but it was like 200,000 followers, something stupid like that. And it's just obviously every time he tagged my name in it, I'd sort of get like 200 notifications like, oh, Ali, not again, just leave me alone. And sort of that prompted some of the worst abuse. Like people found me on Instagram and made some very unpleasant comments about my nose, but we don't need to go into that. Wow. And then, death threats, just like lots of stuff. And it was just sort of, it was fine at the beginning, but the length of time that it went on for and just the amount of people was quite overwhelming. It was also, what was overwhelming was the support of the Jewish community, from people in Britain, people from America, whoever it was. Every time I click on an Azza Winstanley or Ali tweet about me, the first 20 comments would be from people backing me, and then the other like 500 would be people calling me whatever. But the first 20 were, great. So that was sort of that. And then an update on the situation, it's still ongoing. So 180 days or something like that since we made the first complaint. And there's been an investigation, but no conclusion has been reached. The university's done nothing. All throughout this, I was a student. I literally graduated in June, and this all started in February 2021, and I've never received an email from the university about it. Wow. Or from anyone other than from Jewish organisations and the SU, to be fair, because our relations with them got better, and then they've been really nice since the whole BME incident. But from university or of anyone within the university institution has said nothing. And today the Board of Deputies, which is like a Jewish British community organisation, wrote a letter about David Miller sort of literally today because it's still ongoing. Wow. So I don't really know there's no update with that. He's actually, he's allowed to continue teaching the module that got him into the initial trouble, despite being under investigation. So make of that what you will when it comes to the university and their approach to anti-Semitism. But yeah, that was my university experience.
I mean, that story is incredible and it's awful. And I think that if you told that story 10 years ago, as an American, I'd be totally shocked because that wasn't something that we really saw frequently. But increasingly now, we see these stories of anti-Semitism on college campuses being this overwhelming issue that began in the UK, and that the warning wasn't really heeded well by the rest of the world because now it's bubbling up everywhere. And a lot of the time, the most violent threats, the most extreme examples of anti-Semitism are fired toward young women. I think that young Jewish women oftentimes receive the brunt of the anti-Semitic rhetoric that we are seeing thrown around. So your experience as a young Jewish woman on campus and other friends similar to you in similar positions, did you find that they experienced the brunt of it?
Yeah, 100%. I was going to say, like, a lot of the anti-Semitic abuse I received was sort of this fun mix of anti-Semitism and misogyny, like often focused on my appearance, or like they were sex, like not sex, like they were using sexual terminology, or and was sexist, to be fair, and sort of just really nasty, aggressive. It's hard. I don't want to speculate too much about this because I've got sort of confirmation bias on this, but Ali and Azza Winstanley from the Electronic Intifada have targeted sort of persistently 4 or 5 British Jewish women in the similar way that they've targeted me. Now, they may also target Jewish men like this, but there are like 5 of us that get constant, like so I'm still getting tagged in this random nonsense from Ali. And there's like 3 or 4 like amazing women. I don't know if they want to be like, they're quite public figures, like Ella Rose, Izzy Lenga. They're like these really big Jewish women in the community who also, they were very involved in the Labour Party and then spoke out against the anti-Semitism within the Labour Party. And the amount of abuse they received is just sort of like mind-blowing, and sort of they're constantly still attacked by Azza and Ali. So there's definitely these like loud, proud Jewish women in the British Jewish community that I interact with that get huge amounts of abuse. But then equally, the Jewish women that I interact with are quite outspoken. Like, it just so happens that 3 of the people at the forefront of this David Miller campaign were all women. So like me and my 2 flatmates. It's quite the house.
You guys are an active.
Yeah, it kind of helped with the when the abuse was happening. Like, we were all kind of sitting, we were all doing it together. I don't know if this my flatmate I thought this was hysterical. I don't know if this is the sort of humour you find funny, but my flatmates got me a mug with all of the funniest insults on it, and we were just sort of enjoying. It was funny, like it was like
really
jokes.
Funny.
Yeah. So we're like, that was a whole. They got that to make me feel better about the situation, and it was so like when you got Jackie Walker on a mug. Sorry, Jackie Walker's like this. This woman, whatever. When you got her like face on a mug, like, this is funny. But anyway, no. So I just happened, like, I know a lot of strong Jewish women, and therefore they get abused. But so that as much power to those women, and maybe maybe evidence of the important work they're doing, as much as sort of the misogynistic element of it, which is, horrible people like to target women. So
Absolutely.
There's two sides to that coin.
Part of what you're saying, that you coped with humor, I think that was really your online persona at the time, because I remember when this story first came out in the US, the story of David Miller made a big splash across the pond. We watched this and realized how bad things could get and how we were heading in that direction as well. And you became really the face of it because of the Electronic Intifada story. You were someone who we looked to, and you constantly had a reaction of so much strength and so much humor. And I remember one story in particular when they had picked on a TikTok dance that you were doing, and you kind of
that was the dumbest thing. It was
ridiculous. And I think a lot of people would have been, you know what, I'm done with social media, I'm gonna shut it down. And you didn't do that. You thought it was hilarious, and you told us that. And that reaction had so much strength. So how did you respond with such humor in the face of something so upsetting?
I think I'm quite impulsive. Like, if I find something remotely funny about a situation, I can't. I'm a bit addicted to Twitter. That is a separate problem in itself. I found it quite hard not to respond. And some of these people, I find them quite laughable, not that intimidating generally. I mean, if I was in a room with them, I'd probably run. But like, in terms of on Twitter, none of these people are real, and you could sort of say or do anything, and there are, if there are essentially no consequences to like poking the bear, because Ali lives in, I think, America. Like, he's nowhere near me. So when they do, these people, I think they're so easy to make fun of. Like, it was literally on my bucket list. And maybe I regret this now, but it was on my bucket list to get written about in the Electronic Intifada, because I just thought from the off, they are just a ridiculous organization who target loud people that fight against anti-Semitism. So I was like, that is a marker that you've made it in the fight against anti-Semitism if they write about you and think you're enough of a problem. And then when they started like going onto my TikToks, where, my TikTok was barely political. It was me dancing trends with my flatmates and, whatnot. And for them to sort of take a dance and be like, this is Sabrina celebrating, like a dance about Christmas. It was a Christmas dance, and being like, this is Sabrina celebrating the arrest of these Palestinian children or whatever.
Oh god. It's a blood libel, basically.
That was, so Ali's tweet that really like picked up steam was he like quote tweeted the TikTok dance that I posted and said, real life footage of Sabrina celebrating the deaths of these Palestinian children or whatever. Which I thought was a bit unnecessary. And so
you could say that for sure.
So I can't respond being like, no, that's not true, because that's just there's no other way to respond than to just make it light, and just show the ridiculousness of their arguments. I found so that was sort of my just instinct, and it was quite easy to do because they are parodies of what anti-Semitism looks like modern anti-Semitism. I found it quite easy to make light of it, but it was complicated, but that was just sort of my instinctual response, and I was very impulsive, and I tweeted things, and they started doing well, so I continued to make fun of it.
It's really interesting to me, because I think that humor has always been a really prevalent coping mechanism in Jewish culture. So much of today's brand of dry humor is influenced by Jewish comedy because what are we going to do? We're going to cry or we're going to laugh, so it's better to laugh. And it seems like you really took that legacy and made it into something.
I don't think I was necessarily doing it consciously, like drawing on, Jewish legacy of. I mean, there were so many great Jewish performers and comedians and whatever, but this wasn't like some predetermined strategic plan. Whenever I got frustrated at a situation, I was like, right, I will tweet something funny, or I will try and make light of this. That was just sort of what I just thought it was my way to sort of one up them and show that they weren't bothering me, and to make light of something that they like, to show how ridiculous the accusations were and how obvious the anti-Semitism was. And that to me was sort of the best strategy to do that. And then, it doing well on Twitter was a bonus.
Yeah. And now that you are out of college, you're going into the professional world, you're writing about politics and you're making a name for yourself beyond the experience of just anti-Semitism. How has this influenced the way that you view yourself in the context of the world as a Jewish woman? Do you see your path as different now because of what you faced?
I think this situation has taught me a lot about myself, and has given me, actually, like quite surprisingly, you got to find every silver lining to the cloud, and has given me a lot of opportunities online to write things and to sort of express myself and be an outspoken representative of the Jewish community and the student Jewish community. So in that ways, it was obviously it was an awful thing, but in that ways, it was a formative part of my life. So I'm in those ways, I'm grateful that it happened and what I learned from it. Though at the same time, I don't want to sort of be defined by this incident. I want to go on and do other things and not sort of just. Like, only as important as it is to talk about anti-Semitism, I want to be able to talk about lots of things and each of those things to be given credibility. But no, this was like an incredibly significant part of my life, and I've learned a lot about like my ability to cope with things.
Yeah, I mean, that really brings us to our last question, which is something that we like to conclude with every episode here on Nice Jewish Girls. We want this show to give everyone, but in particularly young Jewish women listening to this, access to mentors that they probably will never get a chance to meet, who are in fields they might want to go to or are living through experiences they might face in their future. So ending with that in mind, what's one piece of advice you want to give to the people listening to this about how to navigate the world as a strong Jewish woman?
I'd say never be embarrassed or scared by your Jewish identity. It's such a fundamental part of my life, and it's also taught me so much, and it's led to so many brilliant opportunities. Aside from the anti-Semitism, has led to so many brilliant opportunities, given me the most amazing community, both in the UK and across the pond. And so just always be proud. And obviously there are scary situations, but as long as you're actually safe, never be intimidated, never back down, be strong in your opinions, especially when that's sort of rooted in protecting your Jewish identity and your Judaism.
Sabrina Miller, it has been such an honor speaking with you today. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us, and I wish you all of the best moving forward into your career. For so many years, the British Jewish community sounded the alarm, warning the world of the danger of the sentiments of anti-Semitism growing rapidly on campus. And honestly, we did not do a great job listening. Sabrina Miller's story echoes true for so many students in the United States and around the world, myself included. It is so easy to hear these stories and to be totally demoralized. I was speaking to one of my rabbis on campus about this once, and I was explaining to her the toll that this fight against anti-Semitism was taking upon myself and my peers. And I remember she stopped me and she said, "I am going to challenge you to reframe the way that you say this. As a people, we are not defined by our collective persecution. We are defined instead by our collective resilience. And this is how we have survived for 3,000 years." And she's totally right. Part of what makes Jewish culture so beautiful is its impossible survival. It's this legacy we're privileged to be a part of, and it's something that I'm so proud to be proud of. It's something we can't forget among, well, all of this. And this, my friends, is where we'll leave you for today's episode of Nice Jewish Girls. hopefully a bit smarter and a bit more inspired. Please share your thoughts with us at podcast@jewishnpacked.com. And don't forget to join us next week, when we'll be continuing this conversation with Rachel Azaria, Knesset member and feminist advocate. Nice Jewish Girls is a production of Unpacked, a division of Open Door Media. Rivki Stern is our producer, and I am your host, Julia Jassy. Check out jewishnpacked.com for everything Unpacked related, and subscribe to our other podcasts. And of course, follow Unpacked on all of the social media places. Just look for @JewishUnpacked. Talk to you later, ladies.